Welcome to the Road to the Ryder Cup, hosted by Dr. Jeff Poplarski and my dad, PGA golf professional Frank Darby. Let's go USA!
Hello and welcome to the Road to the Ryder Cup, sponsored by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation and Frank Silla. My name is Frank Darby, and alongside me here is Dr. Jeff Poplarski. So hello, Jeff.
Good evening there, Frank. I'm so excited today for today's show. We have a longtime friend of mine and a USGA, United States Golf Association legend in the operation business, Mr. Frank Bussey. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to see you. But, you know, we have to get right into this because we have the Ryder Cup coming to Bethpage 2025 in September. But I have to reflect back to the first major that ever came to Bethpage, which was in 2002. And you were the operations director for that event. Can you reflect back into 2002? Like, how did the USGA even get an event at Bethpage Black? Because they never had an event professionally prior to that.
This was the first event at a public course. If memory serves, it was David Fay, the executive director of the USGA, and other players at Bethpage. And he posed the question, why haven't we ever had a U.S. Open championship at a public course? And the wheels got in motion. It turned out extremely well.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of really interesting back then, too. And Frank, we have a good mutual friend. One of my best friends is Craig Curry, the superintendent there at the time. So
Great guy.
I was part of his quality. I was on his golf cart for the first, I don't know, for most of the rain that day that ended up showing up on the Monday. So that must have been a little bit of a logistic nightmare for you. But I tell you what, I worked for the Met PGA for 28 years in tournament operations. So I was the main setup guy on the golf course. And that was just a great time. And I worked for Charlie Robson, who was the executive director of the Met PGA at the time. So I think Charlie was pretty instrumental in getting the U.S. Open there as well, as he was very friendly with David Fay.
Yeah, you know, Mr. Bussey, I have to reflect back to that U.S. Open in 2002 because 9/11 obviously was in 2001. And that U.S. Open was one of the first big sporting events after 9/11. The Ryder Cup obviously is going to be in September too, so we always have that backdrop of 9/11 in September here in New York and nationwide. Could you reflect back to some of the things you had to accommodate or put into play because of 9/11 at that U.S. Open in 2002?
Security was very, very tight. We had probably 350 police officers, well above a normal open, surrounding the course, all the checkpoints. And it was very tough to get around without running into security checks. There was a time I was trying to deliver a water truck to kill the dust from some of the roads on course, and I was on Round Swamp Road, stopped by a local police checkpoint, and all they saw was a tanker. She had a gun drawn, and I was sweating bullets. But we called the captain of the state police, worked it out, everything was fine. But that gives you an idea of how tense things could be.
Sure, I know logistically at that U.S. Open too, half the course is in Suffolk County. Well, not half of it. A few holes are in Suffolk. Majority of the holes are in Nassau County. So you had to deal with the Nassau and Suffolk County police. It was on state property, so you had to deal with the New York State Park Police. You also had to deal with the New York State Police. I'm sure there were some other agencies too you had to deal with, but how did you work with all of those groups? By the way, who was the controlling group out of the whole U.S. Open?
That's a good question. It was the state police had the lead, and they were the ones that set the tone, did all the scheduling with the locals. and it worked out very well. It would make sense since it was a state-run facility.
So Frank, out of all the events that you've done, which are way too many to ask you about right now, have you had any serious security issues? Being out of Pebble Beach and all the U.S. Open sites and any of the other events you've done.
We really haven't. As you know, Frank, the amount of planning that you guys do and we do on this stuff is in such a minute detail that you really don't leave room for that kind of mistake. I mean, there are times when things happen that you're not used to, and you deal with that. But in dealing with the state agencies, the FBI and Secret Service, and depending on if you have a president, all these things work in such fine detail that it's unlikely to have an event. I will say, when we had Clinton at congressional, we did have a bomb scare. And the odds were, we were told that it was nothing, but it was our call if we wanted to evacuate or not. And we chose not to, and it turned out to be fine.
Yeah, I remember one of the U.S. Opens. Didn't the operations team build like kind of a bulletproof trailer that Chelsea and President Clinton actually sat in on 18? Was that accurate?
Actually, no. What they normally do is take a bulletproof fabric and put it over the railing, so it protects him. And of course, they have people hidden everywhere. So I mean, it's unlikely they're put in a position that is good for them vision wise. So he's protected.
Sure,
Uh,
sure.
no, yeah, it's good.
So, Frank, if I could just kind of backtrack even a little bit further than Jeff did in 2000, how did you get started in event management?
Well, I was doing some work at a local tennis club in my youth, and back then that they had the Virginia Slim Circuit, the women's circuit, and I was doing some things for that, and it got in my in my blood, and I got into Palm Beach Polo and Country Club. I ran a polo stadium, which transitioned into the tennis, which transitioned into the golf, which is, I mean, once it gets in your blood, Frank, as you know, I mean, there's not much else you want to do.
Yeah, Mr. Bussey, going back to Bethpage, how many tickets was sold like on Thursday, Friday, Saturday in '02 and '09? Because we're hearing stories at for the Ryder Cup. It might be like 30. What'd you hear, Frank Darby? What, 30, 35,000 tickets?
Yeah, I've heard just under 40. That's what I've
Under
heard.
40. What did they have at the U.S. Opens?
Well, I looked that up before coming on, and they sold 42,500 for 2002. So that was paid attendance. In 2009, I think it was maybe a hair more, but not much.
Right, right. Now, there was a book written on that whole experience by John Feinstein called The Open. I know you had some quotes in that book. How was Mr. Feinstein? And tell us about that book about Bethpage Black, '02 U.S. Open.
John Feinstein, the salt of the earth, great guy. Um, he interviewed me a lot for that book, and I mean, it's funny. I'm a straight shooter. I pretty much tell what the truth, and without regard to being politically correct. And John could have hurt me real bad with that book about some of the stuff I was saying. I was being honest, and he didn't. And which in my mind, what I found out about all the other books that he's written is uncharacteristic. I mean, he's normally digging it real deep, but we had a great relationship. I stayed in touch with him a lot, but he interviewed everyone, and the book was just phenomenally good.
You know, Frank, I became friendly with John Feinstein a couple of ways. We both had Sirius XM radio shows. I still do. John, like I said, John is going to be really missed. And I had a player that grew up on Shelter Island, where John grew up, which is just
Yeah.
Have you ever been out there? What a wonderful place out there, and a great golf course. So anytime we played in an event, in a college event down in Washington, D.C., John would be there following us around and just telling us stories. And, we had a big table with a whole lot of the coaches around. I made certain he was invited to the dinner. And what a great man, great author. I mean, I still can't believe that he's written 50 books. I mean, it's just amazing guy. And he had a lot of nice things to say about you and your operationally speaking events operation guide as well. I know he gave you a heck of a review there, Frank.
He did, and I'm not sure people know, but he had such a wonderful sense of humor. And the many times I met him at the Open in USGA Hospitality, and I just fallen off my seat. I mean, I'm talking rip roar laughter. Just a fun time.
Yeah, speaking of that operationally speaking book, which I'm also a college professor and have used your book for many years, about 15 years, but it's the A to Z of the operation of a U.S. Open or any other sporting event, big sporting event. The people at the Ryder Cup could actually use that book and build Ryder Cup there just from the book, because you have everything from how you get at the event, how you secure the event, where you park the cars, you name it, it's in that book. Tell us a little bit about the evolution of that book, because I talk to interns all the time in sports management, and they reflect back to your book all the time.
Well, I started at Shinnecock, really, in late '90s, and I just started writing it one day, and it starts to flow. As you know, once you guys get rolling on something, the thoughts come, and it just made sense to start in the beginning, how to get the event, how to put it on paper, and then each particular area. And over the years, I've upgraded it 3 times. I add union information, the section on fear or the inability to make a decision because you're afraid of the consequences and what that does to you. So it's really good for any event. It can be sized up or down, depending on the size of the event. So it has really helped me, actually.
Oh, I tell you what, I looked at the book today for quite a bit. I'm gonna study it a little bit more. It is definitely the ultimate guide to running any kind of event as well. Let me ask you a question. Who gave you the nickname the Mayor and Busseyville Population One? I love that, Frank.
I was in San Francisco, and it was because we had a village of vendors, really, and it was a close knit group, and I would check on these guys daily to make sure they didn't need anything from me or any of the other vendors. You can get bogged down real fast if a vendor is waiting on something from another vendor, and yet they don't want to go to them and push them, and that would be my job. To go talk to them about it and make sure everyone had what they needed, and that's why I got that nickname.
Awesome. Mr. Bussey, what was your favorite U.S. Open to be the operations director for?
Well, my favorite was Bethpage because it was so big. You had so much room. I mean, we're used to dealing in a thimble, worth of space, and then fighting over every inch of ground to make sure that the vendors had enough and we could go forward. But Bethpage had, with 5 courses, you really had room to spread out, and they did. The vendors, as you guys know, will take as much room as you give them, or as little as you give them, and make it work. But Bethpage was great.
So you must have had a lot of challenges down at Marion, didn't you?
It was interesting. I was asked by the senior director at the time, if I put a gun to your head, could you get everything off the neighbors' yards in 2 weeks? And my response was, is the gun loaded? But extremely tight, vendors on top of vendors, moving vendors out so another one could come in and finish their work. It was a juggling contest. The neighbors were incredibly nice to us to allow us to really destroy their yards. We always put them back, and it took some time to do that, grass growing, that kind of stuff. But it was a very good open. We did have some issues union wise and dealt with that, but it was different. It was really different.
Mr. Bussey, what do you think about parking? I know you're talking about Bethpage being such a great course to have these championships because of the room. How many parking spots did you need in 02 and 09?
It needed about 18,000, or really 20 if you figure two per car. But Jones Beach was great. The shuttle, it took about 30 minutes, a bit longer on a bad day. But the people on the buses were very understanding. There was really no other area close in. We used whatever available space on site for special groups, volunteers, and some corporate vendors and that kind of thing. So 95% of the people had to be at Jones Beach. And it worked out well. They really did. The police helped with traffic, help with some of the lights going through the town. So it was as good as it was going to be.
You know, Frank, this might sound like a silly question right here, but do you like setting it up, and how tough is it to break everything down? I'm sure that and I think I saw in your book that you had the same feeling that I did. Nothing's better than being prepared for anything that could happen, staying calm and getting things done. But I bet you it must have been a heck of a job just taking everything down.
Well, I mean, it's funny. It takes 3 months to set up, and I mean, depending on weather and where you can go and that kind of thing. During the event, if you do your job right, technically you have nothing to do during that week, right? I mean, it's all done. You're sitting back and you're watching, and it's great. On the teardown, the day of the finish, your main goal is to secure anything that can walk away right after that last ball is hit. And I'm talking TVs, banners, anything with a logo on it's going to disappear. So those are the first things that you grab. And after that, it's really just dismantling. And the vendors are ready to go. I mean, they're tired too. So they want to get everything down and out onto the next job site. So it normally takes a month to take it down. It is really quick. Everyone's motivated.
You know, I'm up at Bethpage every day being the golf performance director there. So I go up there quite a few, days a week. And I'm seeing the build up already. It's 6 months. I'm seeing some courtesy cars showing up. I'm seeing, some of the roads being built through the Black. I'm seeing the corporate villages, kind of the foundations going up. And it's just, I'm reflecting back to the US Opens when you had it there in 02 and 09. But Mr. Bussey, what would be, I know it's 23 years later, what would be some of if you were consulting with the PGA of America and the Ryder Cup, what would be some of the things you would tell them to be a little bit more focused on for this Ryder Cup?
would make sure that the building department and the fire department are well inside the loop of what they're doing. And I'm sure they've done this already. But that's a main thing that can go sideways real fast. And unless your ducks are lined up in the building department, fire department, health department, then you could have some serious things that could give you a lot of heartache. But I've been blessed with a lot of great building departments and other departments to rely on. And there have only been a couple of exceptions that have gone sideways. But when it does, it is not fun.
Hey Frank, so did you have an opportunity to go to some of the other big sporting events, not USGA run? Like for example, the upcoming Masters in a couple of weeks, and I'm trying to think of like maybe even go over and see what they do over in Europe as well. Which I don't think they put up that much stuff in Europe anyway. But have you been down to the Masters and experienced that whole show?
No, unfortunately, I have not. I actually worked the Ryder Cup in at the country club back in the day. I ran 3 food concessions for a catering company that Patina back in the day, and I I worked and saw the U.S. Open tennis in for Flushing Meadows, and that stuff was just a lot of fun. I never had more fun. But as I said, all events are designed for who's running them. I mean, their message that they want to get out. So uh, it's each different, and it's all good.
One of the things, Mr. Bussey, is that the ticket to the Ryder Cup, you might have heard this, they're pretty expensive, excuse me, but they're food inclusive. So you buy a ticket for $750 for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but you can basically eat all you can eat. Has the USGA ever done anything like that?
No, and it's the only downside is that it's not upgradable. I mean, I think it's a good concept. They have scanning devices on wristbands that you can put money in a bank, so to speak, go to any concession, they scan the wristband and it's paid for. Um, so I think we're going to find in the future more options available for food. It can be inclusive, but it can also allow you to upgrade your order.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how that basically plays out. But, we're just going to go to commercial break and just hear a word from our sponsor, the Tunnel to Towers. We'll be right back.
I get a phone call by a firefighter. He said, nobody's coming home. And I said, I think that we need to do something to honor, what Stephen did and what everybody else did that day. And we pieced everything that he ran through the tunnel and stuff. We figured that's what he did, tunnel to towers. He ran through the tunnel to the towers where he gave up his life. We, as Americans, better be there to take care of these families that live behind. That's why we make sure as a foundation that we take care of those Gold Star families and fallen first responder families that have young children left behind.
Hey, welcome back to the Road to Ryder Cup. And hey, listen, we're honored to have Frank Bussey here with us today, learning all the ins and outs of, the USGA events and a lot of stories about the events he ran at Bethpage, the future site or the next site of the 2025 Ryder Cup. So again, Frank, thank you for being here. We're learning an awful lot, and I would have liked to have been with you on a cart and seeing you organize these things, and you've done a great job at all of these.
I would have liked that too. I think we would have had a lot of fun on that golf cart.
Mr. Bussey, I just had a couple of other questions. State facility, first time at a public golf course in 2002. How is that relationship? I know you have a great relationship with Greg Currier, Dave Catalano. It was a team between the operations team and the state, wasn't it? You have any thoughts about that at all?
It was. Our biggest point, Jeff, was making sure we have one point of contact because we're moving so fast, and I'm not sure the state was prepared for that kind of quickness. So we had to have someone mainstream this, get to the right person, and initially that took some time to get it worked out. But once we had it, we had a direct line to the people that we needed to talk to, engineers. When you're dealing with the state, it's not just talking to the building department, it's talking to the state people that have their concerns about engineering and things that are happening as far as structural tents and bridges and bleachers and things like that. So we had to do it almost double to make sure that everyone understood what was going on. But we had a great team with Dave Catalano and Courier was just absolutely could not have been more helpful to us.
So, Frank, who did you pass the reins on to? Who is has taken over your position now?
Well, they have divided into so many pieces. It's tough to say that. Back in the day, it was myself and partner Steve Worthy, and we did everything: parking, traffic, security, medical, all that. And now there are different people for parking and different people for security and so forth. So it's broken up into probably 12 or 15 people now doing what we did back in the day. And so it's tough to say. Leighton Shrove, I would say, is the main operations director, senior director. And then there are other directors for mapping and other things relating to operations. So, I mean, it's a very different game now, from what I understand. But they've done a fabulous job on all the past opens that I've seen.
Yeah,
That's all.
mapping is mapping is actually pretty cool. I had it in my class at Farmingdale State. Mr. Bussey gave it to me. It was a whole map of Bethpage that outlined security, garbage cans, fence lines, corporate villages. It was really cool, and I would use that in my class. Which goes back to Mr. Bussey. How many corporate tents did we sell in '02 versus '09? Do you know those numbers?
They were high. I'm thinking the 40s, 42, 43.
Right.
The biggest one was Wingfoot that had maybe 50 something. I mean, a lot of corporate. And we started to wind down some, but we had a lot of room at Bethpage and Mimi Griffin and her group really did a great job in selling. So I think we had in upwards of high 40s.
Yeah,
Right.
Frank, I did mention before about maybe some of the difficulties at Marion, but you know what? I think I might have misspoke because it must have been very interesting at Wingfoot and Brookline, especially where those clubs are so, right in the middle of a residential areas as well. So I know those buses going to Wingfoot, that had to be a pretty good experience getting those things in and out.
That was a real hike there. We put it in some temporary roads, Frank, specifically for the buses, and it was very tight there. Trying to, I mean, when you're dealing with that many people, I mean, you're dealing with 300 buses. I mean, there's only so many a road can hold at one time. So speed is really not the main thought process. It's spacing to make sure that there's room for all these things to happen. But Wingfoot was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge.
One of the things I say too while I'm teaching is, what is a more difficult job, an operations director of the Super Bowl or an operations director of the U.S. Open Golf Championship? And every one of my students raises their hand. They're like, Super Bowl. I'm like, not even close. Because when you have you're the operations director at the Super Bowl, you're using the same Miami Dolphins stadium. They have
That's right.
games there. They could draw off the experiences. They have the parking. They have the food. Where these U.S. Opens are transient. Every year you're going to a different location, different people, different memberships. And man, the complexity of it is just amazing. Any thoughts? Any thoughts on that?
I have to agree with you. Any enclosed event is something that you can do year after year, as you point out. It's the same place, same power, same phone lines are all there, same people doing admissions, parking, concessions. You don't worry about the weather. You're inside. It's a different animal, and it makes it so much easier. It really does.
Yeah, sure.
So, Frank, I've got one last question. I've been bothering you with a lot of different things, but Jeff and I are Long Islanders. We're New Yorkers, true and true. If you can believe it, Jeff and I have known each other, I don't know, since college days, and I'm not even going to tell you how long that is. But I know there's a little concern, and they did mention it at the some of the press conferences about rowdy New York fans. So do you think it has to definitely be on their agenda right here? Do you think that could possibly be a problem, especially with the amount of I don't know, I guess like Jeff said, food and beer and beverage floating around?
Well, the good part about that is you have New York police that are well equipped to handle what you're talking about. I remember when we had a rain delay, that rowdy crowd was singing out, "Tastes great." The other side was saying, "Less filling."
Yeah.
And they were shouting back and forth. And when play started, they calmed down. But yeah, I think they're going to get pretty passionate about this golf.
Yeah, I remember one story about that rowdiness. KJ Choi came into the locker room, and I don't know KJ, but he came in, he put his hands over his head, he goes, "Too loud, too loud, too loud." And yeah, that was interesting. But that was that big delay that NBC wanted to push a couple of more holes before it got dark. They like to give that championship trophy at 7 o'clock at night on Sunday. Everybody's sitting at home with the TV coverage for sure. So, but Frank, Mr. Bussey, what we do is the Tunnel to Towers is our sponsor, and we would like to send you in the mail. We have these beautiful leather wrap rocks glasses with the Tunnel to Towers logo, so you and your lovely wife can have a drink while you're listening to this podcast. And we're also going to send you a Tunnel to Towers hat with the New York Police Department, Port Authority, Fire Department on it. We'll get that in the mail. We have your address, and you can wear that proudly down in Florida for sure. But
Thank you.
yeah, but it's just we could stay on the phone with you for a long time and talk a lot about old times. And last thing I wanted to talk about was you always helped me create. I used to be the wellness director at the U.S. Opens. Now my title is performance and recovery director. But I remember when you first came to my office in like '09, I don't know if you remember that. And I was telling you my concerns about my tent and the air condition and our placement of our tent. And you just ran with it really quick. And you're like, oh, I'm going to get you the best heating and air conditioning. It's going to get carpet. You're going to have drapes on it. You were just so great to us. And any thoughts about that wellness team when you were in years working with us?
Thought it was a great concept. I really didn't know much about it, as you know. I knew that whatever you guys needed, I need to make sure that it happened quickly, so you were secure and ready to go, so you didn't have to worry about that. but I was more interested in the treatment aspects of it, and I dropped by to check it out during the week, and it's an excellent service for the volunteers, for the players, for staff. It makes a difference. I mean, it really does make a difference, and I'm not sure people know that, and they should be aware of how important it is and how much it helps people.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Well, thank you for those comments. But Frank Darby, I know you wanted to say something, but just let me just throw the last story on that. When I worked 2002, there was not one doctor or therapist working with any players. Zero. Last year at Pinehurst, there was about 40 therapists and doctors working with the players. All these top players in the world now have their own personal staff that follows them from tour stop to major, which is really interesting. But 20 years ago, no one was talking about performance and
no,
recovery, but now it's such a huge part of the game. Dobbs, you had
it
something?
makes sense.
Well, hey Jeff, you definitely owe Jason Day for that, because I remember when you were out there in Chambers Bay when he came down with vertigo, and you rushed in
That's
there.
right.
So I think if anything, vertigo definitely helped you get to where you are now.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we helping a lot of people at these championships is certainly rewarding. And as Mr. Bussey knows, we'll continue these services. And not only are we doing the U.S. Opens, we're doing the Women's Opens, Seniors, AMs, Curtis Cup, Walker Cup. And it's been a great ride. But I want to thank you because you gave us what we needed for us to do the job. And the USGA looked at it and said, we got to run with this. So thank you so much for all that effort you put into the wellness team back there, but now it's called the PAR team, Performance and Recovery.
That's awesome. I'm awesome. Glad to hear that, kid.
Frank, hey, listen, thank you for, taking the time to, put up with these two old guys right here. We do have a lot of experience. So, but, listen, the road to the Ryder Cup is just going to be a great journey. And, we're glad we're, within 6 months right now. And we hope maybe we get to see you out there at Bethpage.
I enjoyed talking to you guys so much. I really appreciate the time and energy that you guys put into the show, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of them. And if I can make it to Bethpage, believe me, I'll be on your golf cart.
Yeah. You always got a place to stay in my house, that's for sure. But, to our audience, we're on social media. We're on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, YouTube. Please check us out, follow us, like us, friend us. We do really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week during our next show.
Thanks, guys, everybody. Thank you, Frank. Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.